"Sir, may I take that bowl of soup home? My mother hasn't eaten anything warm today." The words were barely louder than the piano near the marble bar, yet they seemed to reach every corner of Voss and Vine. Grace Miller stood beside table 7 with both hands wrapped around an empty serving tray, as if the tray could protect her from the shame rising in her chest. She was 22, a young black waitress with tired brown eyes, dark curls tied loosely at the back of her neck, and a black uniform faded from too many washings. Her shoes were polished because she had rubbed them with a damp cloth before work, though the heels were nearly worn through. On the white tablecloth before her sat a bowl of roasted butternut soup. It had not been touched. Steam still rose from the golden surface. Beside it lay a clean silver spoon. In 5 minutes, Grace knew, the kitchen would throw it away. Across the table, William Hart looked up from his coffee. He was 63 tall even while seated, with silver hair brushed neatly back and the calm posture of a man who had spent his life entering rooms where people hurried to please him. He wore a dark navy suit without a flashy watch or ring. His face was quiet, but his eyes sharpened at Grace's question. Before he could answer, a cold voice cut through the room. "Put the bowl down, Grace." Grace's shoulders tightened. Victor Langley, the restaurant manager, crossed the dining room with smooth, practiced steps. He was 48, pale, clean-shaven, and dressed in a black suit so perfect it seemed displayed rather than worn. His smile was small and empty. "This is a restaurant," Victor said. "Not a shelter." A few guests turned their heads. One woman lowered her wineglass. Near the bar, the pianist missed a note, then recovered. Grace's face burned. "I'm sorry, Mr. Langley. I only asked because Mr. Hart hadn't touched it and it was going to be thrown away." "You do not ask guests for food," Victor said. "You do not bring personal problems into the dining room. And you certainly do not embarrass this establishment in front of important customers." Grace lowered her eyes. "Yes, sir." William set down his coffee cup. "That is enough." Victor turned toward him at once, his voice softening. "Mr. Hart, please accept my apology. Miss Miller is usually more professional than this. I will remove her from your table immediately." "No," William said. The single word landed harder than a shout. Victor paused. "Sir," I said no. William looked at the bowl, then at Grace. "I would like to hear why," she asked. Grace shook her head slightly. "It's all right, sir. I should not have said anything." "But you did," William replied. "And I think it took courage." Victor's smile tightened. "Mr. Hart, whatever story she has, management can handle it privately." William did not look away from Grace. "Miss Miller, who is the soup for?" Grace swallowed. For a moment, she saw the small apartment on Auburn Avenue. She saw Evelyn Miller, 59, once a strong community nurse who had spent 30 years holding strangers' hands in hospital rooms, now wrapped in a brown blanket near the window because winter light made pain feel less lonely. She heard her mother's voice that morning, gentle but thin. "Don't worry about me, baby. You go to work." "My mother," Grace said. "Her name is Evelyn. She's been sick. Soup helps when it's warm." William's expression changed, not into pity, but into attention. "Why not buy her soup after your shift?" he asked. Grace pressed her fingers against the tray. "I was going to, but my paycheck was short again." Victor's face hardened. "Grace." William turned. Again, Grace regretted the word at once. She thought of rent, medicine, and the electric bill folded inside a drawer at home. "It's probably just the time system." Mr. Langley said sometimes the clock makes mistakes. "How many hours were missing?" William asked. Grace stared at the floor. "Miss Miller." She lifted her eyes. 11 this week, 9 last week." A murmur moved through nearby tables. Victor stepped closer. "This is not the place for payroll conversations." "No," William said. "It sounds like this is where one finally happened." Grace's heart pounded. "Please, I don't want trouble. I only wanted to bring her something warm." William looked around the dining room. Crystal glasses, fresh flowers, candles, half-finished plates guests would never think about again. Then he looked back at the young waitress in the fading uniform, asking permission to rescue a bowl of soup from the trash. "Miss Miller," he said, "you may take the soup home." "Thank you, sir. And the kitchen will prepare a full meal for you and your mother." Her head lifted quickly. "No, sir. I can't pay for that. You will not be charged." Victor's smile vanished. "Mr. Hart, that is not our policy." William stood slowly. "Then perhaps your policy needs to be examined." The room went still. William reached into his coat and placed a business card on the table. "Before I leave tonight, Mr. Langley, I want to see Miss Miller's time records for the past month." Victor went pale around the edges. "That would require approval from Ms. Voss." "Then call Caroline Voss," William said. "Remind her that she invited my office to review a possible investment in this restaurant group." and tell her I would like to know why a waitress in her restaurant can work nearly 40 hours and still need to ask for soup her mother can eat. Grace stood frozen, the tray trembling in her hands. She had entered the dining room afraid of asking for a bowl. She had no idea that the bowl would open the locked door to everything. Grace carried the soup as if it were something holy. The kitchen had packed it carefully in a white paper container with a tight plastic lid. Beside it, wrapped in brown paper, was the small dinner William Hart had ordered: soft bread, roasted vegetables, thin slices of chicken, and a second cup of soup for Grace. She had tried to refuse 3 times. Each time William had answered, "You are not being charged, Miss Miller, and you are not losing wages for accepting food that should never have been made into a debt." Those words stayed with her as she stepped out of Voss and Vine and into the cold Atlanta night. Behind her, the restaurant glowed like a jewel box. Ahead of her, the bus stop waited beneath a street lamp where the wind moved through her thin coat as if invited inside. William had offered his driver. Grace had refused, not because she was ungrateful, but because pride was sometimes the last warm thing a poor person owned. The bus came late. Grace sat near the back, holding the food close to her chest. Every bump made her check the lid. The soup was still warm, spreading into her fingers like a small mercy. Her phone buzzed. "Baby, don't rush, I'm all right." Grace looked out at the passing streets, closed storefronts, a blinking pharmacy sign, a man sweeping salt outside a diner. Atlanta looked different after midnight, softer in places and lonelier in others. "I'm almost home. I brought soup." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then came Evelyn's reply. "Did you eat?" Grace stared at the question, then typed the lie gently. "Yes. Mama." The apartment building on Auburn Avenue was old, 3 stories of brick darkened by years of rain and summer heat. The front door stuck in winter, so Grace had to lift it before the lock would turn. Inside, the hallway smelled of radiator warmth, laundry soap, and someone's fried onions from earlier that evening. At apartment 2B, Grace paused, breathed once, and made her face peaceful. Evelyn Miller sat near the small window with a blanket over her knees. Illness had placed older shadows beneath her eyes. Her once thick black hair was now streaked with silver and tied beneath a soft scarf. On the table beside her rested an old nursing pin she still polished every Sunday. "You're late," Evelyn said. "I know." Grace lifted the bag. "But I brought something good." Evelyn looked from the bag to her daughter's face. "My child, what did it cost you?" "Nothing. A guest didn't touch it. He said I could bring it home." Evelyn watched her too long. Nurses noticed what other people missed: pain behind a smile, hunger behind politeness, a wound in the room before anyone named it. "Sit down," Evelyn said. "Mama, you need to eat first. So do you." Grace went to the small kitchen instead. There were 2 chipped mugs in the cabinet. She poured the soup into the blue one because it was Evelyn's favorite. Steam rose, carrying the scent of squash, cream, pepper, and herbs Grace could not name. Evelyn held the mug with both hands. The warmth seemed to travel through her fingers, into her wrists, into the tired places of her body. She closed her eyes and took one careful sip. Grace looked away. She had seen wealthy people taste food all night without noticing it. A spoonful here, a complaint there, a plate pushed aside because the sauce was not bright enough. But her mother tasted that soup as if warmth itself had returned home. "That is good," Evelyn whispered. Grace placed the second cup on the table. "For you," Evelyn said. "I had some at work." Evelyn gave her a look that had corrected Grace since childhood, without needing to raise its voice. "Grace," the young woman sat. "I'll eat." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Not empty silence, the kind a small family builds around a fragile blessing so it does not break too soon. Then Evelyn asked, "Who gave it to you?" Grace told her about William Hart. Not everything. Not Victor's words. Not the way people stared. But mothers hear missing sentences. "Somebody spoke cruelly to you," Evelyn said. Grace's spoon stopped. "Mama, don't protect me from the truth so hard that you leave yourself alone with it." Grace looked down. "The manager said I shouldn't ask guests for food." "You asked for food that was going to be thrown away?" "Yes." "For your sick mother?" Grace nodded. Evelyn set down the mug with care. "Then the shame belongs to him." Across the city, William Hart remained at table 7 long after Grace had gone. The dining room had begun to empty. Near the host stand, Victor Langley spoke quietly into a phone, his posture stiff. When he returned, William was waiting. "Well?" William asked. "Voss is unavailable this evening," Victor said. "She has been informed and will review the matter tomorrow." "No, she will review it tonight." With respect, employee scheduling is an internal matter. "So are many wrong things," William replied, "until they touch another person's life." Victor's face changed for only a second. William saw it. He had spent 40 years rebuilding hotels from failing properties and broken ledgers. He knew the look of a man who had just realized the locked room had a window. "Bring me Grace Miller's time records," William said, "and preserve the records for every hourly employee who worked under you this month." Victor's voice cooled. "That is a broad request. So is hunger," William said. By 8 o'clock the next morning, Grace was back inside Voss and Vine. She had slept less than 4 hours. Her feet still ached, and Victor's voice followed her through the employee entrance. "This is a restaurant, not a shelter." In the locker room, Maria Coleman stepped in carrying folded napkins. She was 36, with tired hazel eyes, light brown skin, and a plain silver wedding band she turned whenever she was worried. "You came in," Maria said softly. "I'm scheduled, after last night. I thought Victor might tell you to stay home." Grace opened her locker. "I can't afford to stay home." Maria said nothing. The silence between them understood too much. In the kitchen, bread warmed in the ovens, stock simmered, and knives moved in quick rhythm. Voss and Vine looked peaceful before the guests arrived, before polished smiles and quiet rules put everyone back in place. Grace picked up her sidework list: Polish glassware, fold napkins, set tables 11 through 16, refill sugar bowls, check water stations. She had just reached for a tray when Victor's voice came from behind her. "Grace, my office." The room seemed to hear him before she did. Maria stopped folding napkins. Andre Bell, the 20-year-old busser with kind eyes and a nervous habit of twisting bar towels, looked up from a bin of silverware. Victor's office was small, windowless, and too neat. On the desk sat a printed sheet and a black pen placed perfectly parallel to its edge. "Close the door," Victor said. Grace did. "Sit." "I'd rather stand, sir." Victor picked up the paper. "Last night you created an unnecessary disturbance. You approached a guest with a personal request, discussed private financial matters during service, and caused management to be questioned in front of customers. I asked for soup that was going to be thrown away. You asked a guest for food. For my mother, that does not improve the situation." Grace held his gaze. "Will my missing hours be corrected? That is not what this conversation is about. It is what last night was about. No, last night was about poor judgment." He slid the paper across the desk. "Employee admits to inappropriate conduct. Employee agrees not to discuss scheduling, wages, or personal hardship with guests or staff during service." Grace's fingers went cold. "If I sign this, it says I agree not to talk about my hours. It says you agree to behave professionally. It says I can't ask why I wasn't paid for the hours I worked." Victor leaned back. "You are young, Grace. Restaurants like this are built on trust. When an employee damages that trust, management must consider whether she belongs here." There it was, not written as a threat, but placed on the table like a knife under a napkin. Grace thought of Evelyn's hand over hers. "You were not born to disappear quietly inside somebody else's comfort." "May I take a picture of the warning before I sign it?" Grace asked. Victor's face hardened. "No internal documents remain internal." A knock sounded. "Not now," Victor snapped. The door opened anyway. William Hart stood in the hallway wearing a dark overcoat over a gray suit. Beside him was Paul Mercer, his operations auditor, carrying a leather folder and a tablet. Victor rose. "Mr. Hart, I was not informed you were coming this morning." "That seems to be a pattern here," William said. His eyes moved to the paper. "What is that?" Victor reached for it, but William was faster. He read silently. The air grew heavier. "You are asking Miss Miller to sign a warning that prevents her from discussing missing work hours. It is a standard conduct notice." "Then show me the same notice signed by every employee whose hours were shorted." Victor did not answer. William turned to Paul. "Begin with Grace Miller's records." Paul opened the tablet. "The scheduling export shows Miss Miller clocked in for 38.5 hours. Last week." Grace's breath caught. William looked at her. "How many were on your paycheck?" 27.5, she whispered. Paul scrolled. "The week before, 36.2 clocked. 27 paid." Victor swallowed. "The system occasionally rounds incorrectly." Paul looked up. It did not round. It was manually edited. Silence filled the office. Manually edited. Not a mistake, not a glitch. Someone had reached into the hours she had stood, carried, cleaned, smiled, and served, and made them smaller. William's voice stayed calm. But the calm had edges. "By whom?" "Manager access," Paul said. "Victor Langley's credentials." Victor straightened. "Several managers use that terminal." "Then we will need access logs," William replied. "This is outrageous," Victor said. "You cannot accuse me because a waitress told a sentimental story." Grace flinched at the way he used waitress, small and replaceable. William noticed. "Her name is Grace Miller. Use it." The door opened wider. Maria stood outside, pale but steady. Andre was beside her, holding a tray of glasses that trembled faintly. Victor snapped, "Return to work." Maria did not move. "Mr. Hart, Grace isn't the only one." Victor's jaw clenched. "My check was short 3 weeks ago," Maria continued. 7 hours. I thought maybe I forgot to clock in after break. Then it happened again. Andre swallowed. "Mine too. 5 hours last pay period. 4 before that." Another voice came from the hallway. "They told me I was lucky to have shifts at all." It was Rosa Watkins from the dish room, a woman in her 50s whose hands were always red from hot water and soap. One by one, faces appeared in the hallway. Not rebellious faces. Not angry yet, only tired ones. Paul checked the tablet. There are multiple manual edits, mostly hourly staff, mostly closing shifts. Victor reached for the phone. "I am calling Ms. Voss." William placed one hand over the receiver. "Good. Tell Caroline Voss I am already here. And tell her the missing hours have names." Caroline Voss arrived at 10 minutes past 9. The restaurant was not open yet, but the dining room had become too quiet. Servers pretended to polish glasses. Bussers moved carefully. From the kitchen came the low clatter of pans. Yet even that ordinary sound seemed afraid to grow loud. Grace waited near the service station with Maria. Waiting was almost worse than being questioned. It gave fear too much room. She could lose her job. Victor could cut every shift. Caroline could say Grace misunderstood the system, and people might believe her because rich women in expensive coats were often believed before poor. Girls in faded uniforms. The front doors opened. Caroline entered, as if the restaurant belonged not only to her name, but to her shadow. She was 54, white, elegant, and composed. Her camel coat fell perfectly over a cream dress. A gold bracelet caught the morning light each time she moved. Victor hurried forward. "Ms. Voss, I'm sorry you had to come in so early." Caroline removed her gloves finger by finger. "Apparently, Mr. Hart decided my restaurant should begin its day with an inspection." William appeared in the hallway. "This is not an inspection. It is a response." "To what exactly?" "To missing hours." Her eyes shifted briefly toward Grace. Not curiosity, not concern, recognition. "Grace Miller," Caroline said. Grace straightened. "Yes, Mom. I understand you had an emotional moment with a guest last night." William's expression hardened. "She asked for untouched soup that was going to be discarded. She asked a guest for food," Caroline replied. "That is not our standard." Grace felt the old instinct rise. "Apologize, lower your head, make yourself smaller so the room can move on." Then she heard Evelyn. "The shame belongs to him." "Mother was sick," Grace said. "I asked permission. I did not take anything." Caroline studied her. "And now we have auditors in my office. Now we have manually edited time records," where William said. Paul stepped forward. "Most edits reduced paid hours after shifts were completed. The reductions appear across multiple employees, mostly closing staff and dishroom workers." Caroline's face did not change, but Victor's did. "I want all records preserved," William said. "Clock-ins, edits, schedules, payroll exports, manager notes, and any communication about hourly adjustments." Caroline gave a short laugh. "You are not the owner here, William." "No, but you invited my office to review a possible investment. I will not attach my name to a business that cannot explain why its workers are missing wages." At that word, wages, something moved through the staff. A breath, a shifting of weight, a room full of people realizing that what they had whispered near lockers was finally being spoken aloud. Caroline looked around. "Everyone has work to do. This conversation does not concern the floor staff. It concerns us if those are our hours," Andre said near the host stand. Victor snapped, "Andre." William raised one hand. "Let him speak." Andre held menus against his chest. "My check was short. I asked Mr. Langley, and he told me maybe I forgot to clock out right. But I remember. It was the night the dishwasher broke and we all stayed late." Rosa wiped her hands on her apron. "That was my night too. I stayed until almost 1. Paul typed into the tablet. "Those hours were reduced for both of you." Caroline's voice cooled. "This is why workplace concerns should be handled privately. Public accusations create confusion." Grace stepped forward before fear could stop her. "I tried privately." The room turned. "I asked Mr. Langley twice why my check was short. He told me the system would correct itself. Then he told me not to bring money problems into work." Victor flushed. "That is not accurate." Grace looked at him. "I have the messages." For the first time, Victor looked afraid. William noticed. "Paul, make a note of that." Caroline stepped closer to Grace, her voice lowered. Sweet enough for guests and sharp enough for employees. "Grace, you are young. You may not understand the damage a misunderstanding can cause. If you continue down this path, it may affect your future here." The threat was dressed like advice. Maria moved beside Grace. "She is not misunderstanding," Andre added. Neither am I, Rosa said. Nor me. The room was still. Caroline looked at them as if she had never truly seen how many people it took to make her restaurant beautiful. William turned to Victor. Bring me the warning you tried to make Miss Miller sign. Caroline's face sharpened. What warning? Victor hesitated. A standard conduct notice. William held out his hand. Now. Victor returned with a copy. William read it once, then handed it to Caroline. Your manager attempted to discipline Grace this morning for the exact conversation that revealed missing wages. Caroline scanned the paper. This could have been handled with more discretion. No, William said. It could have been handled with more honesty. He tore the warning cleanly in half. Grace flinched at the sound. Then he tore it again. The pieces fell into a wastebasket like a small white surrender. Grace Miller is not being disciplined, William said. No employee who speaks about missing hours will be punished, rescheduled in retaliation, or pressured into silence. Caroline's smile disappeared. You have no authority to make that promise. William looked at Paul. Put it in writing under the investment review. If this restaurant refuses, the review ends today and my office will inform every partner why. Outside, morning traffic moved along the street. Inside, the staff stood beneath chandeliers, still in aprons and worn shoes, unsure whether hope was safe. Grace thought of the soup. She had believed she was asking for warmth. Now she understood. She had asked the first question no one in power wanted answered. By noon, Voss and Vine was open as if nothing had happened. That was the strange talent of expensive places. A room could tremble with truth in the morning, then shine again by lunch beneath polished silver and white napkins folded like obedient wings. Grace moved between tables with a water pitcher in one hand and an order pad in the other. Her smile was gentle. Her voice was steady. But fear did not disappear just because someone powerful said she was safe. Fear knew how to hide behind the ribs and wait. Near the kitchen door, Maria whispered, You all right? I think so. That is not the same as yes. Grace almost smiled. It's the closest I have right now. Victor appeared at the end of the hall. His black suit was perfect, but his eyes were not. Grace, table 12 needs bread. Yes, sir. And remember, he added quietly, guests are not interested in staff drama. Maria stiffened. Grace picked up the breadbasket. I understand. She did not lower her eyes. That seemed to trouble Victor more than any argument could have. In the private office, William reviewed the first printed summary with Paul. The pages looked plain. Names, dates, hours worked, hours paid, edits after shifts ended. But plain things could break a heart. Grace Miller, 11 hours removed. Maria Coleman, 7 hours removed. Andre Bell, 5 hours removed. Rosa Watkins, 9 hours removed. Calvin Price, 6 hours removed. Paul adjusted his glasses. This is only the last 4 weeks. How far back does it go? I requested 3 months. Victor said the archive requires Ms. Voss's approval. Of course he did. Paul handed William another page. There is something else. The restaurant is hosting a charity dinner tomorrow night. For what? Paul placed the invitation on the desk. Across the top, in elegant gold letters, were the words, Feed the Hungry. A winter benefit hosted by Caroline Voss. William read the line twice. Feed the hungry. Yes, Paul replied. Last night, one of her own servers asked for untouched soup because her mother had not eaten anything warm. The words stayed in the room. In the dish area, Rosa scraped food into a black-lined bin. Grace entered carrying 2 plates and stopped. So much food, enough for Evelyn. Enough for Andre's little sisters. Enough for Rosa's husband, who had been out of work since his back injury. Enough for a dozen quiet hungers nobody brought into the dining room because the dining room had rules. Does all this get thrown away? Grace asked. Every night, Rosa said. None of it can go home, not unless you want a speech about liability. Andre came in with a tub of glasses. I asked once if I could take extra rolls after a banquet. Victor said it would encourage unprofessional behavior. Unprofessional behavior. A clean phrase for a cruel thing. Maria stepped into the dish area. Caroline gives speeches every winter about hunger. Last year, she cried at the podium. No one laughed. Then William appeared in the doorway. He looked at the bin, at the untouched bread, at the container of soup cooling near the counter. Miss Miller, he said gently, is this where the soup would have gone last night? Grace did not want to answer, but she did. Yes, sir. Victor hurried in. Mr. Hart, the kitchen is not an appropriate area for guests. I am not here as a guest. A second voice came from behind him. Then perhaps you should tell me what you are here as. Caroline Voss stood at the kitchen entrance in a pale gray suit, flawless and cold. William lifted the invitation. I am here as the man trying to understand how you plan to feed the hungry tomorrow night while the people serving your guests are missing hours from their paychecks today. Caroline's eyes moved across the staff. This benefit raises money for families in need. Grace thought of her mother holding the warm mug with both hands. William glanced at the food bin. Then perhaps we should begin by asking who is hungry in this room. No one moved. But Grace felt the question pass through the kitchen like a match struck in the dark. Caroline did not look at the food bin for long. Perhaps she could not. Waste was easier to ignore when it had no witnesses. In the bright kitchen with Grace, Rosa, Maria, and Andre standing nearby, waste no longer looked like policy. It looked like accusation. "This is becoming theatrical," Caroline said. William held the invitation at his side. "No, it is becoming honest." Victor stepped forward. "Mr. Hart has been reviewing internal records without proper authority, with authorization connected to your investment review," William said. Caroline smiled thinly. "An investment review is not a courtroom." "No," William replied, "but missing wages do not require a courtroom to be wrong." The kitchen went still. Caroline turned to the staff. "All of you have duties. Return to them." No one moved at first. Maria spoke near the dish station. "Ms. Voss, will our hours be corrected?" Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Payroll concerns are handled through management. I tried that. Mr. Langley told me the system was adjusting. Then my next schedule lost 2 shifts. Andre looked down, then back up. It happened to me too." Rosa wiped her hands on her apron. "And me." Caroline turned to William. "You see what you have done? You have encouraged confusion among employees who do not understand scheduling systems." Grace felt something rise in her chest. Not anger exactly. Something cleaner. "We understand when we work," she said softly. "We understand when the paycheck is short." Caroline faced her. "Grace, I am sorry your mother is unwell. Truly. But hardship does not give an employee permission to damage a business." "I did not damage anything, Mom. You involved a guest. I asked for soup. You embarrassed my manager." Grace's voice stayed quiet. "He embarrassed me." The word shocked even her. Maria looked at Grace with pride. William did not smile, but his eyes softened. Caroline stepped closer. "Be careful." William moved slightly, not blocking Grace, but near enough that the threat could not pretend to be private. "No," he said. "You be careful." Paul's tablet chimed. He read the screen and looked up. "Mrs. Voss, we have found manual edits under 2 manager accounts and 1 administrator account." Caroline froze. William looked at Paul. "Administrator?" "The credentials are assigned to Caroline Voss." The kitchen seemed to lose its breath. Caroline laughed once. "My login is used for approvals. That does not mean I personally edited time cards." "Then you will want an independent review," William said. "I will want you out of my kitchen." William's voice lowered. "Pay them." Caroline stared at him. "Every verified missing hour," he continued. "Today. That could cost thousands. It already cost them." Caroline stepped back. "This conversation is over." "No," William replied. The silence is over. For the first time, Caroline Voss had no elegant answer. She walked away, her heels striking the floor like a warning. Victor followed. Grace remained in the kitchen, breathing carefully. The food bin sat half full. The soup on the stove kept simmering. William turned to her. "Miss Miller, I know this is difficult. You may still choose not to be part of what comes next." Grace looked toward the dining room, where chandeliers glowed above tables she had cleaned for months. Then she thought of her mother's words, of Maria losing shifts, of Andre pretending not to worry, of Rosa washing plates until her hands hurt. "No, sir," she said. "I already was part of it. I just didn't know everyone else was too." In that kitchen, surrounded by wasted food and stolen hours, Grace understood something that changed her. She had not brought trouble into Voss and Vine. Trouble had been living there all along, dressed in fine clothes, speaking softly, and calling itself business. The first file arrived just after 3 in the afternoon. Paul Mercer was sitting in the private office with William when his tablet chimed. He opened the message and went still. The sender was Helen Brooks, former payroll assistant at Voss and Vine. The subject line contained 4 words. "You should see this." Attached was a spreadsheet titled Original Time Export. Rows of names filled the screen: Grace Miller, Maria Coleman, Andre Bell, Rosa Watkins, Calvin Price. Then dates, clock-in times, clock-out times, manager edits, and paid hours. The difference was no longer hidden. Paul spoke quietly. "This export was saved before the edits were finalized." "So this is the original," William said. "Yes." Another message arrived from Helen. "I left last month. I kept copies because I was afraid someone would blame me. Staff hours were being reduced after closing. I was told not to ask questions." William read the words twice. Outside the office, dinner preparations continued. Tablecloths were changed. Wine glasses were polished. Everything visible was being made ready for guests. Everything hidden was beginning to rot in the open. Bring Grace? William said. Paul hesitated. Are you sure? She needs to know the truth belongs to paper now, not only memory. A few minutes later, Grace entered with Maria. Her face was careful, braced for bad news. William did not make her wait. We received original time records. They show your hours before they were edited. Paul turned the tablet toward her. There it was, Tuesday, clocked in at 10:58 a.m., clocked out at 8:42 p.m., paid 6 hours. Thursday clocked in at 11:04 a.m., clocked out at 10:18 p.m., paid 7 hours. Saturday clocked in at 9:47 a.m., clocked out at 11:36 p.m., paid 8 hours. Grace read the numbers slowly. For weeks, she had counted dollars at the kitchen table and wondered where she had failed. She had blamed herself for being tired, for not saving enough, for not asking the right way. Now the numbers answered. She had worked. Someone had made the work disappear. Maria covered her mouth. They took my closing hours. Paul nodded. Several of them. Grace whispered, Who sent this? A former payroll assistant, William said. Helen Brooks. Maria looked up. Helen quit after Thanksgiving. Paul opened another attachment. She also sent emails. Victor Langley had written to Helen 3 weeks earlier, reduce closing overages before payroll export. See. Voss does not want labor ratio above target. Another email, this one from Caroline Voss, had gone directly to Victor. Do not put employee complaints in writing. Handle verbally. Staff must understand that scheduling is discretionary. Grace felt the room tilt. She knew, Maria said. William looked at the email again. Yes. Grace closed her eyes for one breath. When she opened them, tears were there. But they did not fall. Something stronger than tears held them back. There was a knock. Andre stood in the hallway, pale. Mr. Hart, Victor is telling people tomorrow's charity event is mandatory for staff. He says anyone who causes problems tonight should not expect to be scheduled next week. Paul picked up the tablet. I'll document that. William stepped into the hallway. Victor stood near the service station, speaking in a low voice to 2 servers. He stopped when he saw William. Is there a problem? Victor asked. Yes, William said. You keep creating new evidence. Before Victor could answer, Caroline emerged from the dining room in a deep blue dress for evening service, elegant enough to look effortless. What now? She asked. William held up the printed emails. We have original time exports and written instructions regarding complaints. Caroline's eyes flickered toward Victor. Less than a second, Grace saw it. So did Maria, Andre, Paul, and William. Caroline recovered. I will not discuss confidential business documents in a hallway. No, William said. You will discuss them with the independent reviewer. And tomorrow night, before you ask donors to feed the hungry, every employee whose hours were altered will be paid what they are owed. Caroline's smile disappeared. You are making promises with money that does not belong to you. William's voice lowered. The hours belonged to them first. The hallway fell silent. Caroline turned toward Grace. You must be very proud. Grace met her eyes. No, Mom. I'm very tired. For some reason, that honest sentence struck harder than anger. As evening guests arrived, the staff stood in the narrow hallway between the dining room and the kitchen, holding trays, towels, menus, and the first pieces of proof that their lives had not been smaller than they remembered. Grace thought of her mother waiting upstairs on Auburn Avenue. She thought of the soup, the warning, the missing hours. Then she understood the cruelest part of what had been stolen. It was not only money, it was the belief that her own memory could be trusted. And now, line by line, the truth was giving it back. Grace learned about the gossip before sunset. She was near the staff lockers, checking on her mother between dinner preparations when her phone began to vibrate. Maria sent a message, then Andre, then Rosa. Don't open it alone, Maria wrote. Grace tapped the link. A local dining blog had posted a photograph of Voss and Vine glowing under its gold sign. The headline was careful enough to avoid sounding cruel, but not careful enough to be kind. Young server causes scene at luxury restaurant before major charity dinner. The article said an unnamed employee had approached an important guest with a personal request, causing disruption among staff. It suggested Caroline Voss, respected business owner and philanthropist, was being unfairly targeted over an internal payroll misunderstanding. Grace closed the screen. A scene. That was what they called it when a hungry daughter asked for soup. Maria found her by the lockers. Grace? They're making it sound like I planned something. You didn't, but people will believe it. Some will, some won't. But truth does not become smaller because someone dresses a lie nicely. Then Grace's phone rang. Mama. Grace stepped into the hallway. Mama, are you all right? Evelyn's voice came through thin but steady. I saw it. Grace closed her eyes. Who showed you Mrs. Parker downstairs? She was worried. I'm sorry. No, do not apologize for somebody else's cruelty. Mama, please don't worry. I can handle it. There was a pause. Then Evelyn said, bring my gray coat. What, my gray coat? The wool one and the scarf with the blue flowers. Mama, no, you need to rest. I have rested enough while my daughter carried shame that did not belong to her. You can't come here. I can sit in a taxi just as well as I can sit by that window. You're weak. I am weak, Evelyn said softly. I am not gone. 30 minutes later, Evelyn Miller arrived at Voss and Vine. Grace reached the front entrance first. Evelyn stood inside the door, one hand resting lightly on Mrs. Parker's arm. She wore the gray coat Grace remembered from church mornings long ago, the one Evelyn had kept even after the lining began to fray. Her silver-streaked hair was wrapped in the blue-flowered scarf. Illness had made her thinner, but it had not taken the dignity from her face. Mama, Grace whispered. Evelyn touched her daughter's cheek. Let me look at you. You shouldn't have come. I know. That is how I know I needed to. Caroline appeared near the host stand, instantly measuring the scene. The sick mother, the young waitress, the watching staff, William Hart stepping from the office behind them. Mrs. Miller, Caroline said smoothly, this is not necessary. Your daughter's employment matter is being handled. Evelyn turned to her. For a second, the room seemed to remember that before Evelyn was sick, she had been a nurse, a woman who had stood beside hospital beds, corrected careless interns, and held the hands of people afraid to die alone. My daughter did not bring an employment matter home, Evelyn said. She brought soup. Grace swallowed hard. Caroline's mouth tightened. I am sorry for your illness, but this restaurant cannot be responsible for every employee's personal hardship. Evelyn nodded slowly. You are right. You did not make me sick. Caroline's expression softened slightly, as if she had won something. Then Evelyn continued. But you allowed my daughter to work hours that were not paid. You allowed her to come home too tired to eat. You allowed her to feel ashamed for asking to save food that was going into the trash. The dining room was silent. I spent 30 years as a nurse, Evelyn said. I know what it means to care for people when no one is watching. Care is not a speech. It is not a gala. It is not a gold invitation with kind words printed on it. Her voice grew softer and somehow stronger. Do not call it charity if the people carrying the bowls cannot afford to eat from them. No one moved. Caroline looked as if she had been struck without a hand being raised. William stepped forward. Mrs. Miller, thank you. Evelyn turned to him. Do not thank me, Mr. Hart. Fix it. The words were not rude. They were clean. William nodded. I intend to. Evelyn reached for Grace's hand. Her fingers were cool, but her grip was firm. I did not come to embarrass you, she whispered. Grace shook her head, tears slipping free. You didn't. Evelyn looked around. Chandeliers, flowers, perfect tables, staff in worn shoes beneath all that shine. I came, she said, so they would know you were loved before they tried to make you small. By 7 o'clock, Voss and Vine looked like a place built entirely out of kindness. White candles glowed on every table. Winter flowers filled silver vases. A string quartet played near the marble bar. At the entrance, a gold sign welcomed guests. Feed the Hungry, a winter benefit hosted by Caroline Voss. Grace read the sign once, then looked away. Her mother had gone home with Mrs. Parker to rest, but Evelyn's words remained like a bell no one could unhear. Do not call it charity if the people carrying the bowls cannot afford to eat from them. Maria touched Grace's arm. You do not have to be the strong one every minute. Grace gave a tired smile. I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. Across the room, Caroline moved among donors in a dark green evening dress, graceful and smiling. To them, she was the generous woman who turned fine dining into compassion. To the staff, she was the woman whose name appeared beside missing hours. William watched from the back with Paul, who held a folder containing original time exports, edited payroll reports, and saved messages. The evidence was no longer rumor. It had dates, names, and numbers. Victor stood near the kitchen door, pale and quiet. At 8, Caroline stepped onto the small platform near the bar. The quartet stopped. Guests turned toward her with champagne glasses in their hands. Good evening, Caroline began warmly. Tonight we gather for a cause close to my heart. In a city as blessed as ours, no family should have to wonder where their next warm meal will come from. Grace's fingers tightened around her tray. Caroline continued. Voss and Vine has always believed that food is more than nourishment. It is dignity. It is comfort. It is love placed on a table. William stepped forward. Then we should discuss the tables in your kitchen. A ripple moved through the room. Caroline froze, then smiled politely. William, perhaps this can wait until after the program. No, he said. It has waited long enough. Guests turned in their chairs. A reporter lowered her notebook, then raised it again. William walked to the front, not hurried, not angry in a way anyone could dismiss. His calm made the room listen. "Last night," he said, "a young server in this restaurant asked if she could take home a bowl of untouched soup for her sick mother. That soup was going to be thrown away." A hush fell. When I asked why she could not simply buy soup after her shift, I learned her paycheck had been short. Then I learned she was not alone. Caroline's face sharpened. "This is inappropriate." "What is inappropriate?" William said, "is hosting a dinner called Feed the Hungry while employees in this building have had their hours manually reduced after they worked." A man near the front slowly set down his glass. Paul handed William the folder. William opened it. These records show repeated manual edits to employee time cards. Grace Miller, Maria Coleman, Andre Bell, Rosa Watkins, Calvin Price, and others lost paid hours. Some complaints were kept off written records. Some employees were discouraged from speaking. Victor stared at the floor. Caroline's voice hardened. "These are internal matters being reviewed." Grace heard herself speak before she planned to. Internal matters still go home with people. Every head turned. For one terrible second, Grace wanted to disappear. Then she imagined her mother's gray coat, blue scarf, and steady eyes. William looked at her. "Miss Miller, would you like to speak?" Grace set down the tray. Her legs felt weak as she walked forward, but each step became stronger than the last. She did not climb onto the platform beside Caroline. She stopped below on the same floor as the servers, bussers, cooks, and dishwashers. "My name is Grace Miller," she said. "I did not know Mr. Hart was important when I asked for the soup. I only knew it was still warm, untouched, and about to be thrown away." No one interrupted. "My mother was waiting at home. She had been sick all day. I had worked my hours. But my paycheck was short again. I was ashamed to ask. I was more ashamed that I could not bring her something warm." Her voice trembled, but did not break. "I am not here to ruin anyone's charity dinner. I am here because people who work should be paid for their work. Maria should be paid. Andre should be paid. Rosa should be paid. Everyone in that kitchen should be able to trust the clock they stand under." Near the kitchen door, Rosa wiped her eyes. Grace looked at Caroline. "You said food is dignity, I believe that. But dignity cannot begin at the donor table and end at the kitchen door." The silence after her words was deep. Then one guest stood. He was an older man in a church collar. "Miss Miller is right," he said. Another guest stood, then another. The applause began softly. Not the bright applause of entertainment, but the heavy applause of people realizing they had been seated inside someone else's wound. Caroline stepped back from the microphone. William turned to the room. "Before another dollar is raised tonight, every verified missing hour will be repaid. An independent review will continue. No employee will be punished for telling the truth." Grace looked toward the kitchen, where Maria, Andre, Rosa, and the others stood together beneath the service lights. For the first time since she had asked for that bowl of soup, Grace did not feel alone. She had not ruined the charity dinner. She had made it honest. The next morning, Voss and Vine did not open for brunch. For the first time in years, the gold letters on the front door looked less like a promise and more like a question. Behind the glass, the candles were unlit. No music played near the marble bar. Inside, the staff gathered in the dining room without trays in their hands. Grace stood beside Maria near table 7, the same table where she had asked for soup. She had not slept much. Her eyes were tired, but her posture was different, not loud, not fearless. Fear had not vanished overnight, but shame had. William stood near the front with Paul and an attorney from his office. On the table beside them lay envelopes, printed reports, and a new policy packet. Caroline Voss was not there. By sunrise, her attorneys had agreed she would step away from daily operations while the review continued. Victor Langley had been suspended pending investigation. The words sounded official and careful, but everyone understood what they meant. The silence had finally become too expensive to protect. William looked at the employees. "Before anything else is discussed, every verified missing hour from the last 3 months has been paid. Additional review is continuing. If more unpaid time is confirmed, it will be corrected." No one clapped. The moment was too heavy for applause. Maria opened her envelope first. Her hand went to her mouth. Andre stared at his deposit notice as if the numbers might disappear if he blinked. Rosa lowered herself into a chair and began to cry quietly. Not because the money solved everything, but because the truth had finally arrived in a form her landlord, her utility company, and her tired hands could understand. Grace did not open hers right away. She looked at table 7. She could still see the bowl in her mind. Steam rising, spoon untouched, her own voice trembling. "Sir, may I take that bowl of soup home?" William approached gently. Miss Miller, this includes your missing hours and the shifts you were nearly disciplined for protecting. Grace opened the envelope. The amount was more than she expected. Not life-changing in the way movies like to pretend money could be, but enough for rent, enough for medicine, enough for groceries, enough to let Evelyn eat without Grace counting each spoonful against the electric bill. Her eyes blurred. Thank you. William shook his head. You earned it. Those 3 words entered her more deeply than praise. You earned it, not you were helped. Not you were pitied, not you were lucky. Paul explained the new rules. Hourly employees would receive digital and printed records of their shifts. Any edit to a time card would require employee confirmation. Retaliation would result in immediate termination. Safe leftover food would no longer be thrown away by default. It would be offered first through a staff meal program, then donated through a local food recovery partner. And, William added, an employee assistance fund will be created for medical, housing, and family emergencies. It will be available under written rules, not personal favor. Grace looked up. Written rules meant dignity. Written rules meant no one had to beg at a table and hope the person listening was kind. That afternoon, Grace went home to Auburn Avenue. Evelyn sat by the window, wrapped in the brown blanket. The blue flowered scarf rested across her shoulders. When Grace entered, Evelyn looked at her face before looking at the bag in her hand. What happened? She asked. Grace placed the groceries on the table. Soup, bread, applesauce, tea, medicine. The good kind, not the cheaper kind that upset Evelyn's stomach. They paid us, Grace said. Evelyn closed her eyes. All of you? They started with everyone they could verify. They're still reviewing more. Evelyn nodded. Good. Victor is suspended. Caroline stepped away. Mr. Hart changed the time system. They're going to donate safe leftovers, and there will be an assistance fund for employees. Evelyn reached for her daughter's hand. Then the soup did more than feed me. Grace gave a small, tearful laugh. I guess it did. No, baby. You did for a while. They sat quietly in the pale afternoon light. Outside, cars moved along Auburn Avenue. Downstairs, Mrs. Parker laughed with a neighbor. The old radiator hissed like it was clearing its throat. Grace warmed a pot of soup on the stove. Not restaurant soup this time. Nothing fancy. Just chicken broth, soft vegetables, rice, and a little thyme because Evelyn liked the smell. When Grace placed the bowl before her mother, Evelyn held it with both hands, just as she had held the one from Voss and Vine. But this time, Grace sat with her own bowl too, Evelyn noticed. You're eating with me? Grace smiled. Yes, Mama. The older woman's eyes shone. They ate slowly. No chandeliers hung above them. No quartet played. No donors raised glasses and called it compassion. There was only a small table, 2 chipped bowls, and the quiet piece of food that belonged to them. Weeks later, Voss and Vine reopened under new management. The staff meal table was placed near the kitchen window, where sunlight came in during lunch. Above it hung a simple sign in plain black letters. No one who serves food here leaves hungry. Grace saw it on her first day back. She stood there in the same black uniform, the same worn shoes, the same name tag polished clean, but she was not the same young woman who had trembled beside table 7. Maria came up beside her. You ready? Grace looked toward the dining room, then toward the kitchen, where soup simmered on the stove. Yes, she said, and this time, when she picked up her tray, it did not feel like something to hide behind. It felt like something she carried forward.